Welcome, everyone. I'm Paul Pangaro. I'm president of the American Society for Cybernetics. I'm briefly your host here. On behalf of the Society, we welcome you to our monthly event from the speaker series. Pile Bunel is here. She's not on camera, but she is one of the arrangers of the speaker series, as is Jude Lombardi, who it's my pleasure to introduce you to today. And I will leave it to Jude to talk about format. And at the end, we'll tell you a little bit about our next event, which you should mark your calendars for. Actually, let me say it now. January 22nd, Domini Pereira, who's been postponed twice and is now able to come, will be speaking on fiction's frictions. And we hope you'll join us then. And now I'll turn it over to Jude.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everybody. Is my screen shared? I don't know.
We only see you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen and go up to play, and let's get started. So first of all, thanks for being here. I look forward to being a part of this conversation, hopefully dialogue conversation. I'm trying to get these images of people out of the way so I can see my presentation. Sorry, guys, one sec. Computers, aren't they grand? I guess I'm stuck with it. I want to move that over. Okay. I didn't mean to do that. Oh, shoot. Can I go back to the beginning? Well, let's start here.
Special thing about Cybernetics.
No, let's not. How do I stop it?
Out of control.
Diane.
Technology is always disappointing.
I know.
Press escape.
Press escape. There. Nah. Okay, I got it. But see, my problem is it's showing up on the other screen. That's the problem.
No. Touch the first slide. Now start.
Yeah. Okay. Now I got it. Now we're gonna go. This is new for me, and Diane Levings has been wonderful helping me figure this out. And so you'll probably hear her speak up from time to time. So let's see if we can't do this. So thanks for being here and being in the process. So I'm going to push play, and this is one possible model for social transformation. And down here on the my right is my original drawing of the situation we're going to be talking about, or the model I'm going to be talking about, that came from. I'll talk about that in a minute. So let me just get started. So I have to start with me. Then there's you and us, living immersed in language, making distinctions, descriptions for explaining our experiences. Two phenomenal domains, the domain of descriptions, logics, and the domain of experience, dynamics. Dynamics are unexplainable. Pickering recently said in one of his YouTube presentations, cybernetics is the ontology of the unknown, or unknowing, I would say. And cybernetics explores and embraces the unknown. The logic of the world is the logic of descriptions. Perceptions are the computation of descriptions. Cognition, the computation of computations. All a consequence of our living immersed in language. And that's a quote from Heinz von Forster, which is on the logic poster from the ASC. I have these in my office, and one represents the logics world of explanation, and the other represents for me the experiential, it's very Zen for me, world. So we have these two domains that we live in, two different worlds of sorts, or not different worlds, but ways of being. So we're going to watch a video now.
The special thing about cybernetics to me is the language. There's notions that come with different perspectives that without the language, maybe I wouldn't have found and I wouldn't have used. And they help me to think about myself, to think about the relationship, the world, to my own intentionality, to my being in the world.
I like Past's idea of the art and science of the defensible metaphor.
Manipulating transformative. Thank you. The focus is on language. The idea is we live in metaphors. Cybernetics is the art and science of manipulating those metaphors, manipulating language, manipulating life.
When Task says metaphor, he doesn't mean metaphor in the sense of analogy metaphor. He means language. He means living. He means enacting through the words you use.
If you know what you want and you know it's possible, you don't need cybernetics. Cybernetics is useful when you want something, you think you want something, but you think it's impossible. Cybernetics then is about how to reconfigure resources in order to get what you want, in order to create a new system, not just a little improvement on the current one.
Sometimes a slight change in language use can bring about a treasure of thoughts that otherwise would never come to speech. Among them may be the sentence we are missing and longing for.
No language in the world has a way in its grammar to express systemic causation. If you change Lakoff's statement or claim to no language in the world has a way in its grammar to express cybernetic relationships, would you agree with that?
Well, that is the challenge, I think, of cybernetics.
The challenge of cybernetics. The following model is an attempt to reconfigure resources and language in order to get what I want, need, and desire. It is not what is, it is what I see now. So this is the whole picture, so to speak, the systemic whole picture. And I know it's a lot, and I'm reminded of Larry saying, when you talk about everything, you distinguish nothing. And but cybernetics demands me, not demand, but invites me to see those bigger pictures and the systemic relationships that exist between and among the different language, words, notions that we bring forth. The model is based on a configuration model or drawing that I experienced at the School for Designing Society many years ago. And Larry, I don't even remember what year it was. It came from a diagram that Larry drew on the board, and then we had a conversation about. Since then, the model's gone through a variety of variations. In fact, I presented one model, probably the one on the introduction video image. Okay, and probably one model that was on the introduction was maybe the one I shared at an ASE meeting in 2015. It generated an interesting conversation, different than I expected. Interesting. So since then, I've played with several variations of his diagram, all nested in cybernetic thoughts, ideas, concepts, and theories, while I'm drawing distinctions and boundaries of circularities. If you see in the middle of this present model, you'll see circularities, and if you go over, you'll see dynamics, and then you see cybernetics, and then you see feed forward and consequences. There's and recursions. There's some of the basic concepts of cybernetics that play throughout this presentation, my way of thinking about these things. Circularities. A fundamental cybernetic notion that invites radical ways of organizing our organization of the worlds we live. Back to nature, even. Indigenous ways, even, for being and doing. There's a recent book I've been reading called All We Can Save, which is an anthology of a variety of different articles by women who talk about the different circularities. And they even have a website where they talk about circles. And it really reminds me of cybernetics. And someday we'll do a presentation around indigenous ideas and cybernetics. So my first drawing will be the distinction that I make between three concepts called possibilities, current, and desirable. So the current world we live, the possible worlds we could live, and what I desire to be. And of course, this is circle number one, and there's movement and dynamics that goes on in this. It's not still in a sense. So I will be drawing distinctions and creating boundaries throughout this presentation. And I'll start down here with the current situation. In recent decades, I have witnessed many people, including myself, voice their longing for new ways of understanding society that might provoke transformative shifts in our thinking and doing, and might create a better world, even maybe a new society.
I've gotten a lot of sense that people are frustrated with the structure of society and the structure of the world we're creating.
Circularity means if A then B and if B then A. This means that there's no natural superiority, that acting is neither better nor worse than understanding. In other words, we need to think in terms of a non-hierarchical world. And it seems that we have a way of looking at the world which moves us from flatness into hierarchy, and that is something that we do with our thinking, and it's very powerful and very useful, but it's not something that we should be imposing on the world. It's something we should understand as a way of thinking that leads to certain types of understanding.
No wonder so many people found cybernetics and systems theory unintelligible. We are a society that is, to put simply, counter-cybernetic, that is constantly sending us the message, don't look at the whole system. Don't notice the context. Don't look at the broader relationships and interactions. Don't think of yourself as part of the natural world. Think of humans as different from and against or ruling over, quote, nature.
I was brought up in the 30s in a middle-class family in Britain, and I was aware that there were problems called the Depression. I got into the army in the Second World War, and I ran slap full tilt into the realities of poverty and so on. It's the same the old world over. It's the poor what gets the blame. It's the rich what gets the pleasure. Ain't it all a bleeding shame? And here we are in Britain with the gap between the rich and the poor steadily widening all the time, as to income, as to actual wealth. Same thing is happening in the United States. Now, why on earth should this be? It is because we have structured a system, not understanding the principle of requisite variety, not understanding this feedback phenomenon, which is dedicated to producing this effect. When you look at a system which you say, oh, this is going wrong, how do we put it right? You should start by saying, why have we designed this stupid system to do the wrong thing?
This is the requisite variety song.
Broken lines, broken strings, broken threads, broken dreams, broken idols, broken heads, people sleeping in broken beds. Ain't no use trying, ain't no use joking.
Sing it.
Everything is broken. In her 2011 letter to the American Society for Cybernetics, upon receiving the Norbert Wiener Medal, Mary Catherine Bateson warned cyberneticians around the world about our current societal problems and the urgent necessity for meeting the need for a radical shift or shifts in our thinking, epistemologies, and doing, performance. She also suggested in that the ASC was the intellectual community for bringing together and focusing on patterns and possible couplings between and among a variety of issues and their interconnectedness. and the possible consequences that might emerge. Hope. As she wrote, after all, who else is going to do it? At the 2012 ASC conference, Jerry Brown talked about how Gregory Bateson once wrote about how millions of people were going to die from major disasters unless we dealt with one of these three major problems: population growth, technological change, or the Occidental idea of man. He also said that Bateson thought our best chance was to change the ideas we have about ourselves, our Occidental ideas about man. Bateson also thought that cybernetics might be our best alternative way for thinking about ways of thinking. So these are some ideas about our current situation and what some people related to cybernetics have thought about our current problems. So now I'll go to possibilities. One of my favorite definitions of cybernetics that guides my thinking and doing was created by Ernst von Glasersfeld when defining cybernetics as the art of maintaining equilibrium in a world of constraints and possibilities. In the following video, I am a video ethnographer. I've been videoing at ASE meetings since 1992, which is when I emerged at that meeting as a videographer. I wasn't one before that, I would say. And so a lot of what's entailed here is short vignettes of people and events and situations related to cybernetics that point at the different concepts and notions and my ways of thinking about these notions, and obviously their way. But I don't show anybody who I don't agree with in that situation. Surprise, surprise, really. So I'll just share this video right now. And also in this video, besides talking about his definition and why art and not science, and me giving an example of how his definition influenced my life on a daily basis, he also makes a distinction between the words viability and variety. So here we go.
The notion of equilibrium, of course, comes directly from Piaget, and it's intimately connected with the notion of viability. Viability is whatever allows you to maintain your equilibrium.
Is viability similar to requisite variety?
Requisite variety was Ross Ashby, Roger Conan's. I don't think so. I mean, if you like, you need a requisite variety if you want to control something. So it's necessary for a viable control mechanism. If you want to build a mechanism that controls some process or some activity, the mechanism you build must at least have the same possibility of varieties of variability as the thing itself. That is the requisite variety. That you can't control a process with something that is simpler than the process. It has to have the same possibilities of modification and the same flexibility, if you like. That was Ashby's principle of requisite variety.
So maybe viability makes more sense when talking about second order cybernetics, and requisite variety
Oh,
makes
absolutely.
more sense when talking
Yes.
about first
Yes.
order. I have to tell you the story of how your definition affected my life. Okay?
That's dangerous.
No, I think you'll appreciate the story. It was snowing, icy, freezing snow, ice, and we live on a hill. And so one day we left to go down the hill to go to the store.
And just as I was going down the hill, a big truck comes up, turns towards coming up the hill. I go to stop the car, and you know what happens. I start sliding right towards the huge brown truck. And automatically, I just go like this. And the next thing you know, I'm hitting the curb. And then I bounce off the curb, but miss the truck. And I start going back towards the truck. So I go like this, do a 360 turn, but never hit the truck. And it was
What?
constraints.
You were lucky.
I was lucky, and I think that the philosophy of constraints and possibilities was very, I'll use the word influential.
Yes.
In that moment.
Yes. Well,
so
very
I thought
nice.
you might enjoy that.
That's very
now,
nice.
I have added, and I don't know, I'd like to hear what you think about this, that the definition is that cybernetics is the art and science of maintaining equilibrium in a world of constraints and possibilities.
Well, I know you want to put science in it. I don't.
Why not?
Well, because science is essentially built on causal relationship. And causal relationships are not important in cybernetics. Well, it's one way of looking at the world, you see.
Yeah, one way.
You mustn't ever think that it's the only way of looking at the world. Never.
Okay.
Cyberneticians embrace opposing ideas, so love is fundamental. And here we're talking about the biology of love, and we'll talk more about that later. But in the meantime, we're going to go to the third component of this first circle, current, possibilities, and now desires. Desires. The history of humanity is the history of desires, Umberto Maturana.
The key for cybernetics is not the definition, it's a vision for a different world.
The late Amos Wilson said, if we desire a better world, we must name the world we desire.
Desires. So desires, and I was turned on by this idea related to desires by, again, Herbert Brun and Monty Brun and other people in cybernetics that I met at the school, or met in cybernetics and continue to meet through the School Designing Society as well. And there's an exercise that I've been doing with them for some time now. And in fact, this exercise is called Designing Desires. And there was a 1984 ASC meeting that has a Princeton, Annetta Dreddy's Princeton edition, where this idea about designing society was explored, and some people in this room were at that meeting, where there was a conversation about the desires exercise. Desires exercise, put simply, is just one method for articulating one's desires. You think about what you want changed in a society that seems impossible to change. And then you make statements into something you know you want to be the case, a desire. And usually you do this in small groups of people and come up with a variety of different, my first experience, different desires, although they seem to be similar in some ways. My first experience with the desires exercise was in 1993 at the School for Designing Society, and my small group included Herbert Brun, Jephthah Davenport, William Gillespie, and myself. And so we sat around and drank wine, of course we did, and talked about what we desired. And this was what we came up with that year. And at that time, I was involved in the conversation. I didn't understand what I was writing or what we were talking about. I didn't comprehend. And even today, I'm still comprehending. I think it's a beautiful example of Herbert Brun's anti-communication, quite frankly. my first experience, right or wrong, my desires. While it is not the case, I desire that the following be the case. We not be the involuntary mouthpiece of our society. The consequence of our desires be desirable. Reminds me of last month's presentation when there was talk about my desire is regard to, well, come back to that later, desires. Our desires be shaped by us only. Our desires be realized, our needs be met, so we will make a necessity-oriented contract with nature. Our activity will include, and this is much a part of this presentation and way of thinking about social transformation, will include the production of necessities, the fulfillment of desires, the invention, initiation, and performance of problems, conflicts, and changes. So that was in 1993.
So that there be some understanding that this is part of designing a society, is to answer questions after having made a statement.
He's going to take it a step further.
True yet, but you wish it to be true.
Okay.
That has to be understood, otherwise we are running totally blind. False statement. The currently best available human knowledges are available to every human at all times.
Whoops, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. How do I pause it? Anybody? Can I do that? Yeah, I can. All right. I wanted to see that whole video. Diane, can you help me here?
Press escape.
No? Go down
Press
to escape. Sorry, bro. Escape.
Go to the slide that you want.
Okay. Let's go back up here. So we're gonna start with this one, and then press play.
Yes.
Okay. So in 1993 we did this, and then I went to the School for Designing Society in 1994, and Herbert decided to do or present his idea in taking your desire statement and turning it into false statements. And so the next video is about false statements that come from your desire. So false statement, something that is not the case, though I desire it to be the case. So I language as if it were the case. And again, this desires exercise will orient my daily acting as a performer. That is what I want to point at here. So let's go to Herbert on false statements.
So that there be some understanding that this is part of designing a society, is to answer questions after having made a statement that isn't true yet, but you wish it to be true.
False statement.
Okay.
That has to be understood, otherwise we are running totally blind. False statement. The currently best available human knowledges are available to every human at all times. Best available human knowledge are updated every hour. Humans use at least 3 languages. At least. The language of needs, the language of necessities, the language of desire, concern, and choice. 4. Technology finds and initiates ways and methods which allow every human to participate noticeably in the deliberations with the currently best available human knowledges regarding the running or contemplation of human society here and now. Violence automatically and totally isolates the violator from all participation until the violator uses the language of creative thought in witnessed monologue. 6. Peace and the retardation of decay are known and met as needs.
I have a question. In your analogy, you said that tiredness is met by and hunger is met by feeding of that. And those, you have physiological definitions of how those needs are met. How do I then recognize peace if I just have it?
What I say is what has to be. I have not told that I know it or I have it. I want you to join me in wanting it. It has not been accepted in this society and in this language that peace is a need. It has been accepted that peace is a reward for some good behavior. Just the other things. Have you ever found out that you have to do something in order to be happy? Yes. Everything is a reward-oriented hierarchy in what we live. We live in a reward-oriented hierarchy. Sometimes it's a sweet situation, sometimes it's a lousy situation, but it is never not a reward-oriented hierarchy. That's why we all are climbers. Can you imagine if we were to start with happiness, what we could build? This is the answer at the moment, is all that we say to one another that we have peace. Now we can focus. Make it part, as you just sometimes say, I love you, or I hate you. Why can't you say, it's peace, let's have it out. It would be wonderful if we could work that out together. I would like that to be introduced into all our issues that occupy us in various intensities, in various places. They all can stand this little item as a spice.
So we would know there is peace. We saw there was conflict.
Yes, but that is what I mean with the loud speaking.
Well.
Yes, if I could tell you, come, let's have it out, then you would know that
then we would know we were in
we
peace
were in peace.
together.
Yes.
Because we can only argue with each other
when
we are in peace.
That's-
Otherwise, we would have to
That
kill
is
each
what
other.
I want. I've tried very many ideas, and I'm not saying that this is best or last.
Peace is known and met as a need. When peace is known and met as a need. The circularity, when peace is need, the necessity for peace becomes clear as conflict or other types of asynchronicity. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But if you're doing a desires exercise, it's really useful to have peace as a need, because then you can embrace your differences and enjoy the conflict and the asynchronicity in ways that something new might emerge. A conversation, if you will, what we might call a deep conversation, or a Pastian sort of, a Richards conversation, or even a Lombardi's kind of conversation. Circle number 2. Dynamics, agency, social transformations, activity, change is happening, always in zero. You know, the old saying, change is happening all the time. Well, change is happening all in zero time. What is time anyway? Well, in his paper to the ASC upon receiving the Norbert Wiener Medal in 2008, Maturana refers to the dynamics of zero time, suggesting that time was and is a necessary human construction in relation to our need for order. Not control, but order. He suggests that our notions such as regulation, control, and cause are all relevant in our logical processes that emerge in our living immersed in conversations, but not our living in zero time. Zero time has nothing to do with logics and everything to do with experiences and the dynamic presence we live. As autopoetics, and that autopoiesis, living, occurs in a continuously changing present in zero time. Yet, we as humans, immersed in language, in a continued flow of our conversations, networks of languaging, see it differently. Some of our logics are doing us in. What can we do differently? What it reminds me of is Vienna in 2003. I was at an ASC conference in combination with the International Systems meeting. And Umberto was there, and here we were, 2003, in Vienna, and Maturana was talking about the biology of love. And I couldn't help think about Freud 100 years before, talking about the fundamental emotion of aggression. And 100 years later, how radical it was to hear Umberto Maturana, and how tingling it was to hear Umberto Maturana talk about the fundamental of all mammals, including humans, being the biology of love. So the second circle, dynamics, agency, and social transformation. We talked about these concepts. Oh, and the other thing I don't think it's here. Once, yes. Once Maturana was asked what he would recommend we do in order to mitigate the cruelty and violence so prevalent in human societies today. And he said we needed to learn, learn's my word, how to let biology work. Let biology work. And I came across this just the other day, and I couldn't help but add it. And Yo-Yo Ma is finding his way back to nature through music, through the biology. And it reminded me of what I'm trying to say and talk about here. And that how these little systemic perturbations are happening in many different places in regard to trying to generate going back while going forward in a presence about the ways we think and how we act and how that can be more natural and less unnatural. Any theory that obscures the fundamental elements of living together, including love, care, food, support, nearness, are illusions. So most theories are illusions, according to Humberto Maturana at the 2012 ASE conference. And the reason I'm making this point here is because we're talking about transformation, and not just transformation, but social transformation. And social transformations are different. There's a transformation going on right now in Ukraine, and it's not social at all, for example. So I, as someone who's into nonviolence, is very interested in performance of how I can live in social relations, which are not nested in violence in any way, shape, and form. So transformation's one thing, social transformation's another. This was another piece of information I saw on CBS 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago, where they had this young couple who are doing scientists who are doing research with dogs, and they've come up with this theory called the survival of the friendliest versus the survival of the fittest. Again, another perturbation element in the systems that we need to interconnect to see that are doing the work that bring me hope and maybe others hope as well. So social transformation. We're gonna watch another little video if that's okay. I hope it's okay. Biology of love, language and languaging. Here we go. Not all, again, it's based in the assumption that not all human relations are social relations.
I have a friend who was once visiting some friends in Bolivia, in the equatorial zone, in the Amazonian zone, and they were having dinner once in the house. And after dinner, they put the chairs back, light a cigarette, smoke,
Let biology work.
and a big spider came down from the ceiling to the table. And my friend said that when she saw this, she said, "Oh, spider!" She was frightened. But the landlady said, "Oh, don't worry, she comes every night to take some food from the table after we have finished and then go." So this corresponds to the behavior from which the other, the spider, arises as a legitimate other with this human, and the humans arise as legitimate others with the spider. In these terms, I'm using the word love. So, as I use it to connote a phenomenon, I can explain that phenomenon scientifically, without the word love interfering with my scientific explanation. And the explanation of that phenomenon has to do with the possible history of recurrent interactions under which these systems drift together in coexistence if they enter in recurrent interaction without destroying each other. Now, the beauty of it is that living systems are such that you can do this practically with all of them, in the domains in which they exist, of course.
If I want to live in relations that bring forth the legitimization of another in coexistence with myself, and want and need an honest language then maybe the biology of love is an emotion that will invite a new, honest language.
I claim that the biology of love is central because I claim that love is the emotion that constitutes the social. At the same time, I claim not all human relations are social relations. Not all human interactions are social interactions. I claim, and I want to make it so, that it be understood that what I say is that there is a fundamental difference in the course of human relations depending on the emotion under which it takes place. If it is love, it is the behavior, the action that constitute the other as a legitimate other, equal existent with itself. One has that which in daily life, not in professional life, in daily life one calls social. And the other emotions have other dynamics of relation. Have work, hierarchical organizations, commercial relations, other things can appear, and the other emotions. My claim is that language could not have arisen without sufficient intimacy in living together in beings, our ancestors, which were not hunters and could not be hunters because they had not the bodyhood for being hunters. They were beings of about this size, they did not have claws, they did not have teeth, so they were gatherers and scavengers.
Agency. I desire to live in social relations that provoke social transformations, and social transformation are always nested in the biology of love. Activity, agency, and acting. Activity is always going on. Agency is what I choose to do when living in a world of constraints and possibilities. Acting, well, we are all actors, acting all the time. And when we act with intent, performers, I want to act in ways and perform in ways that provoke social transformations. From a change agent
7.
to a transformer.
There is maintained the needed transformer. I think that Larry talked enough about transformation.
Transform.
And unless you think always of computers, you might imagine that certain changes of state of an element or changes of state of a system may happen in a discrete way, in a continuous way, even if you have to imagine it, and our digital technology cannot do it. So, but the concept of transformation means with a minimum of discontinuity. Is that acceptable?
Mm-hmm.
So the transformer is available, says this. Of course it is not. Therefore, it has to be said. Were it available, need not to be said.
Activity, agency, and acting. We are all actors acting all the time. And when I act with intent, performer. So let's go to circle number 3. How we doing? Okay, everybody? Hanging in? Hope so. Speak up if you want. So performance, provocations, and conversation. This is circle number 3. Performance, sharing your presence.
All this is results of reading papers on cybernetics, recursion, circularity, self-reference, and if you are in tune, you will notice behind it the whisperings of all these papers between Heinz von Förster, Bateson, Matuano, Harsk, Ashby. 6, very important, performance. Sharing your presence. Sharing your presence. Not the content, not the form, not an opinion, just I'm here.
Sometimes it's done by looking at somebody. It is the colloquial, vulgar version of consensual domain. Conveying your thought and your intention, that need not necessarily be the consensual domain. It probably cannot do without it, but it is the first one really is. The second is already making use of it. Conveying your thought and your attention. Not only one. Lou, thank you. Carrying your messages so that they reach out the way you want, which is different from being a successful writer. The feeling of reach out the way you want should be felt by you on the day I've written it. And you can be sure that all these sentences I share with you gave me that feeling one day. Some of it recently and somewhat some time ago. But you don't get any sentence where I didn't have the feeling it does reach out. Now I hope somebody is there.
Provocations, provocative perturbations, zero time. Zero time cybernetics, I claim is different than zero time, but embraces zero time. Performance provokes deep conversations, provocative perturbations, social transformations. First, cybernetics embraces the knowable. So things like control, communication, objective, goals, and purpose. Notions, such notions are very useful. Second, cybernetics embraces the unknowable, the dynamics, the present processes, the autonomy through conversations. Third, cybernetics embraces the doing of all the above. Again, performance, conversation, provocation. Circle number 3. Conversation is the next part or element of this distinction or drawing or boundary I draw. The conversation age.
The problem is that we're still in the Shannon information age, which imprisons us in the past, because as those of us who understand Shannon, some extremely well, but I think all of us do, that Shannon messaging means that you're going to send me something that I can already expect. And all I have to do is figure out, did you mean this or that or that or that or that or that or that. But the Shannon model doesn't allow me to understand how I can know something new. And because all of the technology we're making, I claim, is based on the Shannon model, messages that are expected, we are essentially screwing ourselves and making the cost of conversation go up. Because the cost of messages goes down, the deluge of messages goes up, and so the cost of conversation goes up. This is my hypothesis. So I envision a new kind of technology, a technology which helps us reach insights, not which helps us send messages. Sing it.
Academia should be a place where we all come together and have a serious discussion about the world we want to make.
As cybernetics. Deep conversations open space for insights to emerge. They begin with asynchronicity and movement towards synchronicity. So peace is a need, love fundamental, and generosity a necessity for meeting our need or desire for deep conversations. Deep conversations.
In a conversation, say about that video camera or the other one which has Steve backing it up, I don't know you guys, or is there another one waiting around? Well, what happens is that we learn more about each other, you and I view. We learn how we not only agree about the nature of a couple of somewhatly different oriented video cameras, but we also learn how we disagree. And in so doing, we learn about each other. And we do that a darn sight more than we learn about video cameras.
I'm learning that I'm doing really cybernetic work. Now it makes sense, resonate. How could cybernetic be useful, such as feminism, for instance, for race and ethnical conflicts and conflict transformation?
If we could declare peace to be one of the needs, like hunger, which has to be met by food, and thirst, which has to be met by drink, and tiredness, which has to be met by sleep, and then you sleep, so that you can do something in order to become tired again. So this is the definition of needs. Needs are conditions that have to be met so that they can happen again. If I could have peace sorted into the table of content entitled needs, it would give us a different English language. We would understand, for instance, that we need peace. And since we need peace, we have to meet it with our conflicts. We have to meet it with our differences. So that there not be war, but that the need for peace be satisfied.
People listen for understanding rather than agreement. So conflict is an invitation to turn
If you take
together.
each end carefully, and I'll get out of the way. Oh. Where did that come from?
How would you undo that?
How would I undo it?
Yeah.
Oh. I'd take a scissors and I would go.
Other than that, without cutting it.
Well, let's see. If she hands it back to me, it might get undone. It did.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So we can
What a
exchange
metaphor.
back and
Thank
forth.
you
We can
so
have a
much.
conversation where we exchange noddings.
Exactly. You deal with the nod and through the conversation and going back and forth through conversation, the nod disappears.
Maybe we're not doing theory, but we're doing improv theater here, now.
Yes. Maybe even some of us are not doing improv, but actually doing and acting based on the concepts of how the metaphors of cybernetics has affected my life, and are performing daily life, hopefully in a way that might transform a conversation.
Circularity of needs. When peace is a need, love is fundamental. And generosity becomes important. Generosity is expansiveness. It is freedom from smallness of mind. It is openness to newness and respect and delight in our difference of understanding, because these differences mean the conversation can continue. Kathleen Forsyth. Okay, so there's that bigger picture again, the systemic relations, and I know it's a lot and can be overwhelming. Performance, consequences, and recursions. Circle 4. Consequences, recursion.
And so I began to find out then by listening the difference between repetition and insistence. And it is a very important thing to know. You listen as you know. I think you also know as you listen. That's recursion, I think. When I first really realized the inevitable repetition in human expression that was not repetition, but insistence, when I first began to be really conscious of it was when at about 17 years of age, I left the more or less internal and solitary and concentrated life I had led in California and came to Baltimore and lived with a lot of my relations, and principally with a whole group of very lively little aunts who had to know anything. If they had to know anything, and anybody does, they naturally had to say and hear it often. Anybody does. And as there were 10 and 11 of them, they did have to say and hear said whatever was said, and anyone not hearing what it was they said had to come in to hear what had been said. That inevitably made everything said often. I began then to consciously listen to what anybody was saying and what they did say when they were saying what they were saying. This was not yet the beginning of writing, but it was the beginning of knowing what there was that made there be no repetition. No matter how often what had happened, any time anyone told anything, there was no repetition. This is what William James calls the will to live. If not, nobody would live.
Consequences. I want to go back to consequences. We never know what made the difference. Hence, cybernetics is the ontology of the unknowable. I'm reminded of what Richards once said, that in our moments towards ways of thinking that consider a variety of interconnected, dynamic sets of elements of systems, means that one cannot know where or how consequences are generated, since change in one state may trigger perturbations, changes in another state or other set of interconnected elements, and so on. Recursion, always back on self, never quite the same. Feed forward. I suggest we explore the meaning and the uses of the term feed forward rather than feedback, since the term feedback today is totally nested in communication rather than conversation. Feed forward, acting on acting, our computation of the computation of our logics and our experiences. It's an area for exploration. Again, the bigger picture, how these things might interconnect in different ways, and how, yes, I might draw distinctions here, but yet there's distinctions to be drawn over here, etc., etc. Dynamics, feed forward, and recursions. Recursive conversations, performance, provocative, perturbations.
Every eye
Well, statement.
not only needs peace, but wants peace. So asynchronicity is an invitation for generating newness through conversations that turns objects into rhythms. Provocative conversations.
It's not a question of what things are. It is a question of how I learn. It is a question of when I can say something. And as we become confident with that, I've explored it in all sorts of different media and dimensions. As we become confident with that, we stop being these outside observers, we stop being these controllers, and we start swimming in something which flows, and flows. Like, yeah. I don't know if I hate these kind of odd words, but there is a sense in which I can trust that if you cut my thread, even that can become the thread that I can then pick up again and makes it possible to say the thing. So these conferences and meetings like this, each time regurgitate stuff, and the next conference it will be possible to say different things. The sentences in which autopoiesis was originally formulated were very contorted, and slowly over time they became easier and easier to say, and slowly over time, so the sense in which the language or the culture or our private language, our cybernetic language develops is the way in which our way of grasping things develops, is the way cybernetics develops. There is no distinction. I'll leave it there.
So there is an undesirable present. How can one let present transform itself into a more desirable. There's always the idea of radical change. Radical change takes place in the mind.
Just one more question for now.
What are you tending to, and how might it fit with this model? The end. I'll stop sharing. Now if I get out of here. Okay. That's it. Anybody there?
Hi, Drew, that was a work of art.
Thank you.
And
Diane.
Yes, and it's something that I will want to go over and over with, because as you said, these are not going to be repetitions, but each time I look at these little jewels of statements in their context, they have a new meaning. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Can we make it full screen and not just focus on me at this point? And it is recorded, so since it's recorded, we can go back and experience the insistence rather than the repetition. Comments? Questions? How are you tending? Is it overwhelming?
I'm really looking forward to watching again on the recording so I can stop and pay attention.
I'm sorry, who's speaking?
Hi.
Oh, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
And I live not too far from you, so Fred's been eager to introduce us, Fred Steyer. So I hope that I have a chance to talk to you again. But yeah, I'm looking forward to going through watching the recording a little bit more slowly, and being able to stop it and kind of think through and take some notes. It was really very interesting. It was a lovely job too.
Thank you.
To break the silence, I'll introduce a comment.
Michael. Jerry.
It is rare in my decades that I've had such an intellectual feast. I will enjoy this banquet for a long time. And it really is a synthesis of unusual magnitude. The question that comes up in my own mind is not one of contention at all, but the question is one of how. The videos cover vast ranges of philosophies, of intellectual history, of perceptions, of goals and setting goals. But it's very short on the issue of how. And I'll just leave that as an open question.
Okay. If I might respond briefly, just for me, the how is the ways of thinking about ways of thinking, and that hopefully this opens space for different ways of thinking. And my way of thinking affects my doing. So this is my response. Do you want to say something, Jerry?
Well, ways of thinking. Yes, there are multiple ways of thinking. For me, the question, I guess, would be, how is the way of thinking connected to the signs that the world provides to us? In this context, recent efforts in the area of semiosis and the question of howness with respect to development of symbol systems is coming to the fore. And the particularly curious comment about the severe limitations of Shannon information and the expectations that are necessarily within the same symbol system.
Yeah, I don't function in symbol systems. Yeah.
Pardon?
I'm that's a language I don't relate to. For me, the how is in the deep conversations that allowed us to have our differences so that the insights might emerge, and that the importance of living in mutual respect, the legitimization of the other is how I can be generous and have those kinds of conversations, that we need to create spaces where we can have those kinds of conversations. And I don't think we've been able to do it without seeing our fundamental need for love, the biology of love, in relation to that asynchronicity and conflict. But let's move on. Let's let someone else have a chance. Go ahead.
Okay. So I would concur that is foundational, and it comes with the fundamental notion of relation, the relation to the other, the biological relation to the other, and the overall ecological relations to the other. The question of how is when in real time one is confronted with a confronted, I don't
What
mean
is real time?
in a derogatory sense, but
What is real time? Real time is zero time. Zero time. Time is irrelevant. It's being in the present, being able to collect everything I've come to know and experience and think, and be in a moment where I'm able to try to perform that understanding with the other.
I agree that that's a necessary part of the continuum, but the history of biology, my understanding of biology, is one of continuous transformations.
Okay. Someone else?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to give, again, in this time, after saying what I said about time, we are on a limited constraint and possibilities. There is a limited amount of time. So someone had their hand up.
Yeah, it's Claire Atwell.
Hi, Claire.
Hi, and Jude, thank you. That, it is, that was just a really wonderful, wonderful exploration in sort of connecting of a lot of dots, and thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I work a lot as a community artist, but the work I've been doing and the focus has always been towards a sense of coherence, not just with the communities in which I'm working, but the ecological coherence, which often had been missing. And so I've been working a lot with, at the bioregional scale, trying to, bioregional learning. And the thing that I do notice is that working very much at the grassroots with people grappling with stuff where they've actually got their hands dirty. What I notice is that unless the recursions of the conversations of the people, there's just these different domains that are happening. The people with their hands dirty are wanting to have the conversations with the people that are more based in the theoretical of, and the academic. Like there's just the praxis needs to be there. Otherwise, the nuances of what you were talking about in those recursions, they just don't enter in. And they're critical to be part of the conversation. I don't know if I'm being clear. It's very hard to articulate.
Yeah, we don't have the language for it yet. We don't have the language for it yet.
Yeah. So the frustration is trying to show that there is this big gap. And really what I observe is that unless there is the scaffolding to support the theoretical understanding at the grassroots level so that it gets integrated in, this gap, and actually there isn't any sense of understanding that they don't know what they don't know, what's going on at the grassroots. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that forward because I still see it as so prevalent, and how we bridge that back into, So thank you.
Yeah. And hopefully this is a beginning of a conversation around such things, not the end. Someone else want to say something?
I chip in. Thank you for this. This was very exciting, Jude.
Hi, Michael.
So we have high expectations. Yeah. So we bring our expectations in here and this process of transformation. But what about, I remember the short video by Brun about the malicious hecklers, the people using different language and using the same language, but actually already having a different opinion. So what about those people that participate in our conversations, but have a different mindset, a different intent, and actually not wishing to contribute?
That's an interesting question, and I think that's a common dilemma, and I think it's a matter of how, if we live in the biology of love with that asynchronicity, conflict, disagreement, how, and knowing that everybody has their own, from my way of looking, that everyone thinks differently anyway. We all have our own epistemology. Some of us just seem to be more connected with our ways of seeing the world than others. And so how do we, this becomes, I think, the fruit for a conversation, so that insights around that kind of issue. It's like Annetta says at the end, cybernetics has a history of like continuing that conversation. How do we not drop the ball here, but keep this going and begin to look at how might we as a group of intellectuals, according to Mary Catherine Bateson, that see systemic thinking and us being an important element of this process, how can we continue that conversation in a forum for exploring exactly what you're asking for? Because I think that's the only way we can do it. And that requires participation by as many as possible. Yes, and maybe there is the need, what some people call it, to agree to disagree, so that we can.
And an honest generosity, yes.
Generosity, an honest generosity. I love Kathleen's definition of generosity. It's been with me for years now, decades even. It's just, it fits with when peace is a need and conflict and asynchronicity become the necessity for meeting our need for peace. Without love and generosity, it's less likely to emerge or happen.
Thanks,
and some
Jude.
people just need to not, it's like when Herbert talks about false statements and that violence, you're immediately removed, right? So there might just some people who that has to be the case for a while, but then we have to find ways to embrace working with said people, I think, and moving forward. Mark, hi, glad you're here. It was more Brun than I expected, by the way.
What's that?
The piece was more Brun than I had anticipated, by the way. Just saying.
I'm glad to see everything and try to grab some things. One thing that I grabbed was the word provocation. And you had it in one of the circles, I think.
Yes.
With performance?
Yes.
And what was the third? I don't remember.
Might have been recursion. I can tell you in a minute. Yeah. Well, actually, performance, provocation, and conversation.
Yeah. I'm picking that out in relation to several things. One is what the presentation video of the question of how to get insight, and that recycling of observations, I'm not getting the wording right, was not going to generate something new. And so the unanswered question was, what's going to bring about something new? And among the whole field, among the things that you were presenting that were getting at contradictions or anomalies, things that we perceive in the current world that don't fit in logically, or logics that run into each other. I remember Larry kind of in his run up to making the thing that you were playing off of wishing that our noticing of anomalies and contradictions could be made into provocations that would then generate conversation. And so to me, that looks like where at least one of the avenues where transformation could happen, where our conversation partners are invited into or provoked into coming up with different distinctions, and kind of a next step forward. That I'll just leave that at there.
Well, what I hear you saying, what triggers what you said for me, what I'm triggered with is that, yes, provocation, performance, provocation, and conversation. So I perform, sharing my presence with a desire to provoke perturbations, provocative perturbations that generate conversation. So that nest is what I hear you speaking to.
Yeah.
That's what it says to me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the word provocation came forward as a consequence of a School for Designing Society conversation a couple years ago, where Susan was talking about perturbations, and I'm like, no. I like what Maturana says about perturbations. So I ended up doing a short video that didn't make it in here about provocative perturbations. Okay, so they go together in the sense of I want to be provocative that stimulates. I can't control that. We know that, right? But I can provoke maybe and orient ways of thinking that might generate spaces for those conversations where insights might emerge in a conversation age, which, Paul, I still don't think we're at. And that was 2011, I think you were making those comments, but I think you're still working towards it from what I experienced.
I'll just throw in one other connection I wanted to make was to the question of the malicious commenters, and that
right.
provocation might be one direction for that. But you've got other hands up there.
Whatever that means, we'll have to leave that for another time.
We have a number of hands up, and I just want to acknowledge that we'll probably run over, which is perfectly fine for those who can stay. But I have the feeling we have more than 7 minutes of questions, so forgive me for interrupting again. I just wanted to say that our next speaker series in the ASC sequence is Dulmini Pereira. I mentioned this early on, January 22nd, with Frictions. Also, Metaforum is planning a meeting in June from the 8th to the 10th, which is likely to be in Manchester rather than Cranfield. Elena will provide more information as possible. And of course, in general, the American Society for Cybernetics welcomes inquiries of your interests, and including membership and so on and so forth. I'll put in a minute, one of us will put in a minute the ASC website and how you can reach us. And with that, I'd like to thank Mateus for all of his help. And I turn it back to Jude and Diane, and to allow you, Jude, to take it out as you wish, for as long as you wish.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. So who's up next? Larry. Hi, Larry.
I do. Yeah, I see your presentation as being the provocation that I would like to see ASC take up in their conversations. So thank you very much.
Oh,
for
thank
that.
you.
I was quite moved. A couple of other things with respect to the question of how. I recall that Herbert Brun once, when he was talking about this idea of peace is a need, was asked, okay, fine, peace is a need. It's not how people talk about peace. It's not how people think about it. How does this ever get to be mainstream? And his response was, just say it. Say it.
That's right.
Say it again, and then say it again and again and again. And eventually it will be in the mainstream. And this is how transformation happens, with minimal discontinuity. The other comment is that, yes, we live in this current society. We do things in this society. When we see suffering, we want to do something about it. And in doing something, if we're successful, we're actually reinforcing the current society, but that's what we do. I think for me, the idea of what we do and how we do it is that when we do these things, whatever it is, that we do it in a way that might generate a conversation with those who we are doing it with, that might lead to new thinking. And that's just another thought on the question of how.
Thank you. Elena.
Hi. Well, first, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I'm looking forward to listening to it again and, kind of contemplating all these nuggets that you left out for us. But my question is, how can we move forward in terms of creating more space for innovation? Because I think that there's an awful lot of thinking, in even progressive contexts that really doesn't go much beyond the equivalent of Newton and Euclid, which were fine for their time and their boundaries. But how do we get to the point of being more open and actually thinking that innovation's a good and necessary thing?
I think that's a good question for the future of the ASC conversation that Larry was pointing at. Anyone else? I know somebody else had a hand up. I thought. No? We've got 2 minutes left. No other comments? Thank you all. And we're not going to stop with this. We're going to keep going with it, Diane and I don't know what it'll become, but this is just the beginning of this idea. And I really like Larry's idea about us embracing this as one element of the ASC. And the future speaker series, maybe. Or maybe a conference someday again. Are we done? So quiet.
Thank you, Jude. Thank you, Diane. Thanks, everyone.